Hello everyone, Giltar here with an action figure review. This time we'll be looking at Tartarus from the Halo 2 Collection Series 7 figures from McFarlane Toys. And I previously reviewed Sergeant Forge, which you see in the front here. Now, for size comparison's sake, I've got not only do I have Sergeant Forge to compare, figures from the same line, but I also have the high-grade Universal Sentry RX-782 Gundam on the left here, and on the right I have the Master Grade 1:100 scale version of the same Gundam, one-year war version. And as you can see, Tartarus in the middle here dwarfs Sergeant Forge and the high-grade model kit. And even though Tartarus is shorter than the Master Grade RX-782 Gundam, as you can see, it's no slouch. It's actually quite large, and Tartarus is actually somewhat crouching down. If you really count the height at the top of its mohawk, it's about eye level to the Master Grade Gundam. And really, if you look at it, the bulk of its legs and arms, for example, are actually a little larger than the Gundam here. So the Tartarus action figure is actually quite large. Now, the one difference between the Tartarus and Sergeant Forge action figures in terms of how they're advertised, on the front of the Sergeant Forge box, it boasts 26 moving parts, basically. Well, for Tartarus, it actually says, instead of 26, it has 28 moving parts, which really intrigued me because when I first bought Sergeant Forge, I didn't buy any other Halo figures because I wasn't sure what to expect. But after experiencing the sort of positive points of Sergeant Forge, I went back to my local Walmart and picked up Tartarus here because it apparently has 2 extra points of articulation, or moving parts. Now, as far as Tartarus goes, it's also a $13 figure. Both Sergeant Forge and Tartarus were $13 at my local Walmart, which is pretty impressive if you consider just the sheer amount of material that goes into making this figure is probably 3 times the amount of material that went into making Sergeant Forge. So I'm pleasantly surprised that Tartarus went at the same price point as Sergeant Forge. Now, as far as accessories go, it only comes with one accessory, this large warhammer, which is a gravity hammer called the Fist of Rukt, I think. Now, I didn't mention this in my Sergeant Forge review, but I actually have very little knowledge about the Halo franchise. I've never actually played any of the games. I'm one of the rare few, and I'm also someone who, even though I didn't play the games, I've always read up on Halo. I really like the art direction for the games. I really like the concept of the storyline behind it, and so I really like the character designs for sure. And now, actually, to be honest, I'd like to try out some of the games at some point because these figures are really making me interested in the franchise beyond simply the visuals. Now, as far as the hammer goes, it pegs into the top portion of the hammer via this peg here. However, it's not a symmetrical shaped peg. It's actually somewhat rectangular with a beveled top. So it only fits into the slot here, or the port or the hole, in one way, and just it clicks right in. Now, one thing to be aware, because it's asymmetrical, it doesn't have rotational ability. If you guys buy this action figure and you first pull this hammer out of the packaging, hold off the temptation to twist it in order to remove it. You have to just pull it straight out, because if you twist it, because it's not symmetrical, it'll probably snap the peg or damage the accessory in some way. Now, I really like the sculpting of this warhammer. It's quite large, very archaic looking in terms of its design, except for the head of the hammer, which has some very technological looking design points. Very cool looking, excellent paint application. It's like a lot of dry brushing of metallic paint over base colored paint to really bring out the highlight of certain parts. And here's the thing, both the figure itself and the warhammer are very dense and heavy, and they feel very sturdy. They feel like you can actually hurt somebody with this. Listen, I mean, that's some serious damage you could do to somebody. It's like those little meat mallets you have for tenderizing, steak or whatever. This is what it is. It's like one of those little kitchen tools, essentially. And as far as Tartarus goes, I mean, listen. I mean, that is the sound of some serious material involved in the manufacturing of this toy, basically. So that in itself, just the physical presence of this figure is very impressive to me. When you pick it up, it feels like a pound or so, probably just over a pound in terms of weight. It's really heavy. Now let's get into articulation, because it does, again, the packaging boasts 28 moving parts. Now let's get into the articulation starting at the feet, which actually is my favorite part because it's got full range of movement. It has a swivel and hinge component, so you have movement all the way around. You can bend it up and down a fair degree and side to side. And what that allows is it allows Tartarus to actually strike some nice, not the widest leg poses in the world, but it can have its feet flat on the ground with some interesting posing here. Now combine that with the rest of the points of articulation and you get some really great possibilities. Now moving on to the knees. The knees themselves only have one point of articulation. They don't bend. They bend to about 90 degrees. Not the greatest, but when you consider like it looks like the brute has sort of a mix of like elephant and rhino physiology. It's a really big character, so I don't expect it to have super flexibility in terms of its ability to bend limbs. Now the hip articulation does suffer somewhat. Now rotational ability, no problem, but the ability to move to the side is only about that much. To the front, not really a lot, and not to the back. But that's partly because of the sculpting here. And again, just like with Sergeant Forge, it has enough articulation, more than enough for my purposes. I can actually get into this figure into some nice poses for my preferences. So I don't mind the fact that it is limited at the hips there. Just like Sergeant Forge, no waist articulation, and I don't expect any because it would interfere with his really great looking sculpt of his body, hair, or fur. Though it does have a really great pivot point in the mid-chest here in the torso. You have a really great degree of bending back and forth. And basically a great range of rotation. You could probably rotate it all the way around like this. So yeah, and that's really great. Now as far as the shoulders go, the right shoulder can bend up to about 90 degrees. The left shoulder, unfortunately, because of the shoulder armor, is hindered here. You can only go about that much before risking snapping off this piece. You have full rotation as well, no problems there. You have a swivel cut at the bicep to allow full rotation, a joint at the elbow to allow a 90-degree bend, a swivel joint below the elbow to allow full rotation below the elbow, rotation at the wrist fully, and a hinge point so you can bend the wrist as well. And finally, the head itself, or the neck rather, has a ability to rotate all the way around, bend back and forth quite a bit, and the mouth or the jaw actually has a hinge, so you can actually have it move and have them like sort of shouting or yelling. Very, very great, really great articulation all around, especially when you consider the proportions of this character design. So overall, I really like this figure. I like it more than Sergeant Forge. This has become one of my favorite action figures in my collection for a couple of reasons. First of all, just by looking at this figure itself for what it is, it's exceptional. McFarlane level sculpting here. Excellent sculpted detail. Great paint application. A lot of dry brushing and paint washes going on to bring out the details, to pop things out. Even the soles of the feet look really interesting with this elephant or rhino-like foot with these kind of like trio of suction cup things here. I don't know if any of you guys, if you have more Halo knowledge than me, if you can tell me what purpose these parts of the feet, what they serve, but I'd really like to know. And just really great look. I mean, I really like barbarian type characters, brutish characters. I'm into fantasy fiction, so ogres and things like that are something that interests me. So the brute characters from Halo are really characters that I like just because of the concept of the visual design. Just large ogreish type creatures. Some really great details though, because even though this is really a barbaric looking character, you have some parts that this is like a really sort of architectural inspired shoulder armor design here. The bandolier looks a little more archaic, but then you have this sort of bicep not bracelet, but bicep armor here. I don't know what this is. Some really cool neck armor here as well. So overall, yeah, just an excellent sculpt combined with a really great range of articulation, with a really cool looking and intimidating looking hammer accessory, the physical presence, the tactile feedback of having this figure in your hands. All these things combine for me to make a really great figure. It's $13, which is, in the scheme of American action figure products, is a little high, but considering that this is really kind of a hybrid between a standard action figure with, attributes of high-end action figures like this great sculpting and articulation, a $13 Canadian price point for this is great. I mean, I don't find a problem with that at all. I mean, the only one weakness I would say in this figure is basically limited articulation at the hips. But then again, you don't need the Tartarus character to be doing, you know, splits or a high kick, even though that would be kind of funny to see. So yeah, even more so than Sergeant Forge, I would say Tartarus is a must-buy action figure for any Halo fan. And again, if you're a general action figure collector, consider buying Tartarus, because it's a really great-looking figure with a lot of posing potential, and it would really stand out in your collection. A really just great conversation piece, because if somebody walks in and sees a whole bunch of, you know, Iron Man or comic characters or robots, and then they see Tartarus, people will probably say, you know, what's this guy? And they'll, you know, if you let them pick it up, and they'll find out, like, wow, this guy's, you know, crazy. You could probably kill somebody with this. I just find that really amusing. So that's my review. I hope you guys enjoyed it and got something out of it. As usual, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys at the next video.